Okay, I'm going to talk about energy a little bit, and not the physics definition of energy, but kind of the energy that we use to fuel our lives. That's the context I'm using here. So, that's largely fossil fuels. So, I want to make a link between energy and the economy. So, there are corporations who produce this energy, right? They extract the oil from the ground or whatever, and they take that oil from crude oil to gasoline and beyond, and in effect, they use that process to profit from the people they are selling that energy to. So the main takeaway I want to drive home in this video is that we are allowing corporations and owners and stockholders to profit from energy sources that are necessary for our survival. Now, if you are a wealthy person, you probably don't think twice about paying your energy bill, and paying your gas bill or whatever it may be, your natural gas bill or your the gas you put in your car. You probably don't think twice about it. On the other hand, if you're not wealthy and these energy prices go up, it's going to hurt you, right? It's going to push you in. It's going to put economic stress on you. And see, this is a problem. Okay, when you keep a population down by basically price gouging them for necessities. Now, necessities could be energy, it could be shelter, it could be food, right? When you push the working class down with these high prices on necessities, it creates kind of a toxic environment. And I'm not talking about like climate change or pollution here. I'm talking about like a toxic economy. It creates this bitterness among people. And why? Well, because something they need to survive, there's other people profiting from that thing. And basically, you've created a two-tier caste system. You've created a system where there are wealthy people who are profiting from by selling necessities to people who need those necessities to survive, right? So it's very bad, right? It creates that toxic environment. It creates bitterness. It creates social strife hopefully between the upper and lower class. Oftentimes it doesn't show itself that way, but if you look at these recent United Auto Workers strikes, there's some tension between these between the wealthy class and the working class, right? If you listen to these the strikes they're having and the speeches, there's some people yelling some nasty things, and that's that toxicity I'm talking about. It creates bitterness. It creates a harsh environment, and eventually that harsh environment is going to lead to some kind of revolution. Now, it could be and the truth is, we've already seen revolutions to an extent. We've seen, by definition, I think revolution is defined differently than how I'm going to define it. But the truth is that if you have people who are going into banks and robbing them, that's the beginnings of a revolution. The reason that is happening is because people feel like they've been treated unfairly, and people are always robbing banks, right? So the truth is there's always some magnitude of revolution occurring, but as that theft and the crime and the robbery, as that rises, basically the magnitude of revolution is rising. And when it hits a certain threshold, that threshold basically recognizes more organization among the working class, right? And again, when it hits a certain threshold, that's when you truly call it a revolution. So my point here is that if we allow owners, stockholders, to buy stock in these energy companies, these companies that produce oil, gas, and even other necessities like food, shelter, and even healthcare, if we allow companies to profit and buy into the value production that the laborers are creating, and we pay them dividends even though they're not actually contributing to the value production, again, it raises the wealth inequality, it creates toxicity, and the end result of that is going to eventually lead to a revolution. It's going to lead to, first of all, people not being able to afford the necessities, and then that's how the revolution starts, right? The takeaway I'm trying to nail home here is that we cannot allow capitalistic markets to profit from necessities, and energy is an important one to mention there. And this concept kind of applies worldwide. Okay, we need to nationalize energy first and foremost. And the reason I say energy is because when you go get healthcare, you have to get healthcare locally, right? You generally, maybe you go to Mexico, but generally you're not flying overseas to get healthcare. You're not generally going to fly overseas to buy a house, right? So the reason I'm zeroing in on energy here is because our oil gets shipped across the world, right? Oftentimes. So the point is that if we don't internationalize energy, if we keep allowing, I don't know, some Middle Eastern country to profit from our oil, and then maybe the U.S. makes deals with them, or maybe the U.S. starts wars with them to control that oil production or those oil fields or whatever it may be. When we allow that to happen, we basically created a mob, or equivalent to like we've created mobsters that are just gouging the public for their need for energy. And again, this is not good in a long term for any economy and for the social structure of a society in general. It's just, again, it creates that toxicity, it creates that bitterness, it creates tension, and eventually that tension hits a threshold where it starts to rise exponentially. And again, that's what I would define as a revolution, when you hit that turning point, that inflection point. So the bottom line is that if we want a world that works for everybody in the future, we're going to need to internationalize energy, and we're going to need to make it basically a non-profit organization that produces all of the energy. Otherwise, before long, you're going to have people going into their backyard, cutting down trees, or their neighbor's yard, cutting down trees just to warm their houses. Like, it's going to happen eventually. It's going to get, like, the laws we have, the standards that we have, the morals we have, they're just going to decay, and they're going to decay out of necessity because people are doing what they need to survive. The theft's going to go up, the robbery's going to go up. It's really a simple concept if you can think about it logically. And yet we allow all these corporations and the stockholders who have the money to buy into those corporations to profit, again, from the value production created by laborers, despite the fact that day traders are providing no value. Maybe those day traders argue that they are providing stock that can then provide growth for the companies, but the truth is that if the wealth inequality is going up, we know where the dividends are going, and we know that the laborers are not getting a fair share of their value creation. So the bottom line is that you cannot allow you can't allow people to profiteer from necessities. It doesn't work. And again, the point of this video is to point out the need to internationalize energy in general, but it also applies to other necessities, as I said. So obviously we need to fix the market that creates housing, the healthcare market, even the education market, if you consider that a necessity, which I'm a little shaky on that one. I'm not sure I would lump that in with healthcare, energy, and shelter and food. But again, food, that's an important one. We can't allow people to profit excessively off of these things, and that's what's happening. And that's why your gas bill goes up. That's why your electricity bill goes up. And what power do you have? And here's the thing: oftentimes the government, they'll subsidize the prices of gasoline, right? That's just your tax dollars paying for gas. That's the government deciding that they're going to pay some corporation with your tax dollars to subsidize your gasoline. It's you paying those higher prices. And in all reality, if we remove the profit motive from the markets that produce energy, those subsidization would be, in theory, would be given back to you through other programs, right? Or maybe just lower taxes in general, or maybe it could go towards healthcare. No, but instead we have, again, the healthcare is another example. We have the government paying billions of dollars to pharmaceutical companies to pay for vaccines, right? The bottom line is that the government can provide, like it can distribute these tax dollars wisely, but they're not doing it, okay? And the reason they're not doing it is because we're voting for the wrong people. We're voting for people that fool us into thinking they're going to represent our interests, and they don't represent our interests. I'm not trying to say I'm a libertarian or an anarchist. I'm trying to tell you that I am an anarchist in the sense that this current government is just not it. And in that sense, we need to get rid of them entirely. And the way you do that most effectively is by voting for candidates that are not seen on your mainstream media news channels. Okay, hell, if you are a charismatic person and you have a drive and you to run for office, run for office. Don't wait around. Try to find people who think like you. Maybe find someone who owns a billboard and thinks like you and give you a little deal on an advertisement, because you got to get your name out there, right? Try to run for office. Don't be afraid to, because the truth is if we keep allowing the psychopaths to run the government, the people who are just trying to siphon wealth from the working class, we're gonna continue down this road of profiteering, and before long we're gonna have a monopoly on energy. And that's kind of ultimately what we need. We need to monopolize energy, but the monopoly needs to be owned by a government that is controlled by the working class, not a government that is controlled by corporations, right? And that's what's happening now. The government, again, they take those tax dollars, they give them to the corporations, and it's just a cycle of profit between the government, the corporations, and you could throw the media in there. The bottom line is that the current government needs expelled. They need out. And I think most Americans know that, but a lot of people they blame the Democrats or they blame the Republicans. They blame one side or the other. But you have to look at the wider picture here and realize that the current state of affairs we have now was brought to us by those Democrats and those Republicans working together. So you can't try to push all the blame onto one or the other. It is the combination of both sides, and they're all working with the corporations, and you can't, maybe not all of them, right? There's some good senators and good representatives out there, and you know what? Keep them in office. That's good. But by and large, if we're looking to elect if our next president is just another millionaire who is advertising their book and who made their money selling drugs in the pharmaceutical industry or something like that, or if it's Trump and he made his money, I don't know, doing whatever the hell he did, or Biden, who again is just this career politician. We got to get rid of the career politicians. We got to get rid of the corruption. And until we do that, don't expect anything to get better, and don't expect things to get better by voting for politicians that are shown to you in mainstream media, because it won't happen. Again, there's a cycle I like to speak about between the mainstream media, the government, and basically the candidates that the mainstream media pushes. So the government, the politicians who are elected, right? They push policies that benefit the corporations, okay? That raise the profits of the corporations, and then the corporations pay the media corporations to advertise for the candidates that will hopefully become politicians, and then in theory they vote for the legislation once they're working for the government that benefits the profits of the corporations. It's a cycle of profit between corporations, media corporations, and the government. And the media's role in it is that the media controls public perception. Okay, so if you listen to who the mainstream media tells you to vote for, you're going to be voting for corruption. Okay, it's like a guarantee. And that's the thing. You cannot vote for who the mainstream media tells you to vote for. or they're going to continue to price gouge you for these necessities that you need. And you know, maybe you're in the upper class and maybe you can weather the storm, but in all likelihood you're not going to weather the storm of the working class that is growing. And that's the takeaway here. It's like, eventually, if you push people too far, they're going to flip, right? So just give that a little thought. Thanks for watching.